You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 16th of July 2024 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead...
It is therefore my honor to nominate Ohio Senator J.D. Vance for the office of Vice President of the United States of America.
As the Republican National Convention opens in Milwaukee, Donald Trump's running mate is announced. We'll have analysis of the latest in the US presidential race following the assassination attempt on Trump. Britain's new Labour government is trying to make it up with Europe. But after the bitterness of Brexit, can the relationship ever be the same again? In Pakistan, Imran Khan's party is to be banned as the government slaps further charges on the former Prime Minister. We'll be in Karachi to assess the political situation. We'll hear about a new rail link taking skiers straight from London Station to Swiss slopes. We'll get a roundup of technology news and have a browse through the world's front pages. Plus, plans to turn one of London's hotspots for the alternative scene is set to get a makeover. Monocle's Carlotta Rebello is here with more. Good morning, Carlotta. What do you have for us today?
Hi, Georgina. Yes, Camden Council has announced a trial which will see its iconic high street be pedestrianised for an 18-month period. So how will this change the area? We'll find out more.
That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. Israel struck the southern and central Gaza Strip yesterday, putting more pressure on Hamas, whilst a refugee camp in the area says it can no longer provide 700,000 people with drinking water after running out of fuel. In France, the far-left faction of the alliance that won the most seats in the parliamentary elections suspended talks with its partners on Monday, plunging the left's efforts to capitalise on its victory into disarray. And the Financial Times quotes Hungary's Viktor Orbán saying that if Donald Trump wins the US election, he's developed well-founded plans to demand peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, the four-day National Republican Convention began yesterday, less than 48 hours after a gunman opened fire at former President Donald Trump at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Well, let's head first to Wisconsin to get an update on security measures for the RNC following this weekend's assassination attempt. Mary Spekusa is a politics and investigations reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, covering the event. Mary, what's the security situation there? What, if any, changes have been made, and what's the mood like?
Initially, they were saying that no changes to the security plan. We've been working on this for 18 months. We're very confident in our plan. However, after the President Joe Biden, directed the Secret Service to reevaluate their plans, the head of that agency came out and said that they were kind of strengthening or tightening security. They did not give us specifics on what that meant exactly, but as far as we can tell, the security perimeter remains the same, and they did not ban guns in the kind of soft perimeter around the hard perimeter for the event. So those kind of obvious changes have not been made, but it does seem like security has been tightened. I'm in downtown Milwaukee right now, where there are, Secret Service agents and police officers and law enforcement, pretty much any direction you look. I think probably for attendees, there's a lot of excitement. I think probably for a lot of Milwaukeeans, there's maybe some nervousness, or people are on edge with what just happened over the weekend. And certainly, I would say most people who do not have to be in Milwaukee today or are not here for the convention are kind of steering clear of downtown. So this was like the easiest commute to work I've ever had in my life, because nobody's really on the roads heading down here except for really attendees, law enforcement, lots of reporters around. But it's an interesting mix of kind of more packed inside the security zone, but really kind of almost empty streets outside.
Mary Spekusa, thank you very much indeed. Well, Donald Trump was greeted by rapturous crowds when he arrived at the RNC yesterday. have Natasha Lindstad on the line. She's Professor of Government at the University of Essex. Natasha, thanks for joining us. Just tell us about that welcome. I mean, it was an echo of what he said after he was shot, and more ominously of what he said just prior to the January the 6th storming of the Capitol.
I mean, the last few days in American politics has been really quite insane, and so we're seeing just huge reactions on both sides, and notably the Republicans are more united behind Trump than ever. I think they see him as sort of this invincible Teflon Don. I've heard that term describing him, Superman, messianic type of figure. Some of the imagery that his daughter-in-law Lara Trump posted, almost comparing him to Jesus. And so I think it's not surprising Trump would receive that type of response at the convention. People are more behind him than ever. And this is at a point in the Republican Party where Trump really controls the party. He had already had an unwavering level of support amongst Republicans. But I think you're going to see more and more fundraising efforts and more imagery of Trump in this sort of savior-like way, or Superman style images around him, as they believe that, he faced death and was sort of saved by either some divine intervention or that he himself is invincible.
And even those who were once against him are now on sides. For instance, J.D. Vance, who is his running mate. What can you tell us about him?
It's really interesting, the transformation of J.D. Vance, who's 39 years old, a freshman senator from Ohio, who is a noted author, and he had referred to Trump at one point as someone that he feared would become America's Hitler. And so he was one of Trump's most vicious critics, but he's completely changed his tune, and Trump picked him not because he would help him win a swing state. Ohio's not a swing state. Not because, he had a lot of experience, but because he was young and that he thought he would reinvigorate the party and that he would carry on the MAGA message, which is about America first, isolationism. And Vance has been an effective surrogate for Trump, attacking the Democrats and what their agenda is, and in particular attacking Joe Biden. He was one of the few hours after the assassination attempt that, along with Donald Trump Jr., that blamed Biden specifically for the assassination attempt on Trump. So he's an attack dog, and Trump may also personally like him as well. They do seem very close, but this is really about what the vision is and the need to have someone young to carry on that MAGA agenda.
Now, Trump's had a seismic legal victory this week. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, he had the documents case, the classified documents case in the state of Florida. This was a federal case, but it was thrown out by the judge, who has been the recipient of many criticisms of the way that she's handled the case from legal experts. So there's certainly going to be an appeal. This was a big win, of course, for Trump. At least we could say his campaign has had a good few weeks here. And this is other good news for him, but we'll likely see an appeal about this.
And it should be noted that, of course, he appointed that judge.
Yes, exactly.
Now, Joe Biden's been speaking publicly. What's he said?
So he has been put in a pretty difficult situation, one for the last few weeks since the debate, which was a huge disaster for him. He's had to defend critics that are basically within his own party that are saying he needs to step down because he's too old. So he went on NBC and had an interview with Lester Holt, where he was trying to not only defend the issues around his age, but accusations that it was his rhetoric that led to the assassination. Of course, he categorically denied this, but he did express some regret when he had spoken to donors and say we need to put Donald Trump in the bullseye. I had never even heard that he had made this statement, so I don't think it was something that was widely publicized, but it was that exact statement that J.D. Vance picked up on. So he was having to defend all different types of things. And I think at the end, he was trying to make the case that Donald Trump still poses a threat to democracy and that it's very difficult to talk about these things, but that, he is the best man to defeat Donald Trump. He defended himself yet again about that. And that, his campaign will carry on in trying to criticize the threats that Donald Trump faces to democracy.
And Natasha, finally, I've just been having a look at some of the figures of what's happened after previous assassinations or assassination attempts. And there does seem that there is a slight poll bounce, but it doesn't last for very long. How do you see these developments affecting the result of the election?
Really good question. I think that the main impact is going to be Trump is going to receive a lot of funding. So his support in the last year has remained at 46%. And no matter what he does, whether he's convicted of a crime or, as he was recently made a convicted felon or, the assassination attempt, I don't think we're going to see huge changes in his support. That being said, I think the Republicans, though, are more energized than ever. They are more united than ever. They and you could see it from the convention. I mean, they were just electrified by even his presence. So this comes at a time when the Democrats are completely fractured, when they aren't united behind a candidate. They don't even know what they're going to do, if they're going to, carry on with Biden or not. So I would imagine that this is going to mostly impact the campaign in terms of fundraising more than anything else. I think a lot of Americans have their minds made up, and I'm not sure what it's going to do to those who are undecided.
Natasha, thank you very much indeed. That's Natasha Lindstadt there. And this is The Globalist. It's 8:12 in Brussels, 7:12 here in London. Britain's new Minister for European Union Relations, Nick Thomas-Symonds, went to Brussels yesterday for his first face-to-face meeting with the EU Commission Executive Vice President Maroš Šefčovič. According to the government, the aim of the meeting was to set the ground for further discussions between the UK and the EU as the UK seeks to reset its relationship with the bloc and build closer cooperation on shared issues. Well, I'm joined now by Monocle's foreign editor, Alexis Self. Alexis, lovely to have you with us. I mean, who can forget the bitterness of Brexit 2016? This country was absolutely divided, wasn't it? Do you recall that time?
Yeah, well, of course I do. I mean, it was a long time. I think the question was finally settled about 5 years after the referendum when Britain formally left. And I think one person who definitely does remember that time as well is Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister. And I think even if he wanted to reverse Brexit or even, delve into that subject again, I think it's politically impossible because of, as you say, the chaos unleashed by the referendum.
And so in terms of this meeting, what was the readout from it? Well,
as you said, I think London wants to reset relations with Brussels. We're not revisiting Brexit, but there was an announcement yesterday ahead of this summit in Oxfordshire on Thursday at Blenheim Palace of European leaders, the European political community, which is different from the EU and includes the UK. And what European leaders have said is that they're open-minded about how to reset relations with Britain. And on the British side, that means revisiting the trade issue, really. Since Brexit, since Britain formally left the common market, exports have fallen. There's been lots of complaints from the business community in the UK about the effect that coming out of the common market has had on trade. And so Britain really wants to kind of bring down some trade barriers and ease trade between the two markets. On the EU side, if that were to happen, or if any kind of special access were to be granted to the common market, then the other kind of unalienable rights of EU membership, the most important, I think, being free movement of people, would then also have to be part of that deal. And then, that's where the difficulty comes in for London, because, I think the one thing that they don't want to even go near or mention is this free movement.
Was defence on the agenda?
Of course, yeah, defence as well. I think, if it were going to be a quid pro quo, or at least Britain is dangling its status as the top military spender in Europe in front of Brussels, and obviously the security situation on the continent has changed since Brexit, with the war in Ukraine, and European economies, European countries are spending a lot more on defence than they were back in 2016. And I think, and the UK has engaged in some bilateral deals with different European states since the war, and especially strengthened defence cooperation with Scandinavian countries and the Baltics. I think Britain is trying to use its defence budget and its military expenditure and its navy and air force as a kind of enticement to perhaps get more favourable trade deals from Brussels.
So we know that the new UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has been meeting key European partners. He went off on a tour right after the election. What are his priorities?
David Lammy's an interesting politician, and before the election, he's been the shadow foreign secretary for a few months, and he's been talking about this new doctrine of his, which is called progressive realism, which might sound like a sort of jargonistic term. I think it means after perhaps the Brexit vote and accusations that Britain still was engaged in this project of maybe imperial grandeur or this idea that it was somehow, different from Europe or more, it had its own destiny separate from Europe. I think progressive realism is part of a kind of policy to re-engage and to kind of be realistic about, what Britain as a kind of, middle power, a country of less than 70 million people in Northern Europe can achieve in terms of foreign policy.
Now, as you mentioned on Thursday, the UK government will host the 4th European Political Community meeting, the EPC, at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire. Do we know what's on the agenda there?
Yeah, I think very much security, as we mentioned. I think that's why the UK is hosting this at Blenheim Palace, the birthplace of Winston Churchill, who is a figure from British history who, still elicits a lot of sympathy within Europe for obvious reasons. I was at the EU Parliament just before the parliamentary elections in April, and there's a building of the European Parliament is named Winston Churchill. So I think it has that symbolism there. People coming to Blenheim Palace. There's 45 leaders, so lots of leaders from non-EU countries in Europe, and I think really the main thing on the agenda is for the UK to propose, or at least begin discussions on a joint UK-EU security pact.
I wonder, though, just back to the thorny issue of Brexit, if those agreements that the Conservative government signed are limiting for any further agreements that might come up now.
Yeah, I think, as I said, that free movement thing, I think, Labour really, David Lammy, his first day almost as Foreign Secretary, he went and visited his counterparts in Germany, in Sweden and in Poland. Labour are being applauded, and I think rightly so, given what came before for trying to re-engage with Europe. I mean, really, this is basic stuff, and why the Conservative government beforehand wasn't making more of an effort to extend a friendly hand to across the channel. I don't know, but that's in the past now. I think one thing that Brussels has spoken about, which is, this idea of not complete free movement, but free movement, a kind of youth mobility scheme for 18 to 30-year-olds, which would allow young Britons to move to the EU, to work and live for 4 years and vice versa. Before the election, that was proposed by Brussels, and Labour rejected it outright, and you know, as I said, because of the thorny issue of Brexit, but also a free movement, and that being, you know, one of the red lines as far as the British government is concerned.
And finally, Lex, do you think Labour can make the UK relevant on the international stage again?
Yes, I think so. I think that there has been, I mean, lots was said about Keir Starmer's first week in power, and you know, he concentrated first on visiting all the nations of the United Kingdom, all 4 nations, and then he was in Washington at the NATO summit. I think part of that is this idea of a kind of centre-left, you know, unity, transatlantic unity between Joe Biden of the Democrats and Keir Starmer of the Labour Party, and then Macron, who perhaps isn't so as much centre-left as centre, and then you've got Olaf Scholz in Germany. There is this idea, and Pedro Sanchez and Justin Trudeau, there is this idea that at the moment that there is a kind of common political grouping between the major Western capitals. Of course, you know, that could all change, and Macron, we've seen, has been, you know, almost defenestrated in the past few weeks, and then Biden, well, who knows what's going to happen there in November. But I think at the moment there is goodwill, as there always is with a new government, and this idea that perhaps Labour will be more outward looking. It's traditionally a more internationalist party, and then you have that political commonality between the leaders right now. So I think, you know, it's still the honeymoon period, but I think that there is, you know, there is a desire from other Western leaders, especially those in Europe, to try and reset relations and move things forward.
Alexis, thank you very much indeed. That's our foreign editor, Alexis Self. Now, still to come on the programme.
Eurostar knows that this is very popular with skiers who want to burn fewer emissions and obviously be more sustainable.
The return of Eurostar's snow train service, connecting London to the Alps. This is The Globalist.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
It's 7:22 here in London. I'm talking to you from Midori House. I'm Georgina Godwin, and joining me in the studio is Zoe Grunwald, who is Westminster editor at The Lead. Good morning to you, Zoe.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's lovely to have you here in front of me to talk initially about France, this big story now, the failure to agree on a new PM, and the left-wing coalition is in a stalemate.
Yes, and this is something that I think a lot of people anticipated would happen after the snap election that happened in France just a week or so ago. So the left-wing coalition that won the most seats is already facing division. Its leading party, which is the LFI, said it was going to suspend negotiations over failure to agree on a prime minister. The rift comes at the start of a really crucial week in which the government will resign and new MPs will vote on Thursday to appoint a new president of the National Assembly. So yesterday, the LFI said it would not resume talks about forming a government or agreeing a possible prime minister, and accused the PS, which is the other part of the coalition, of playing into the hands of Macron, whose centrist alliance ensemble pushed the far right into third place. This is something we knew would happen. There's plenty of division within sort of French politics, and when Macron called this snap election, there were worries that any new administration, even if it did push the right into the background, would still be divided. And we're seeing this play out kind of in real time, which, as I say, was what a lot of people had anticipated when this happened.
I mean, Macron says he will not work with the government led by the LFI. The LFI and the RN have said they'll launch a motion of no confidence in any government that included the other party.
Absolutely, chaos. And it was a real gamble when Macron decided to call this election in the hope of pushing the right back. But now what we're seeing is more challenges from the left. And as you say, neither Macron nor the LFI are willing to work with each other, which is going to be very problematic in forming this new government.
Yeah, well, all over the world, people are having to try and make compromises and do deals with themselves about Donald Trump, because as it looks increasingly likely that he gets in, he's been taking calls from leaders, including our own Keir Starmer. Tell us more. more.
Yes, so Keir Starmer and his Foreign Secretary David Lammy subscribe to this progressive realism ideology when it comes to foreign policy, which is something they say basically means they still have progressive values. You know, they are a centre-left government, but ultimately they understand they might have to work with leaders they are not particularly fond of in order to achieve those aims. And you could say Keir Starmer's recent reaching out to Donald Trump, who is now the Republican, officially the Republican candidate and highly likely to be the president of the United States, it means working closely with them. We know that America and the UK have a special relationship, and Keir Starmer and his team are still very keen to keep this relationship, even if it means working with somebody like Donald Trump, who isn't exactly a natural bedfellow of Keir Starmer.
Absolutely. Now, he and Trump had never actually spoken directly or even indirectly before, but David Lammy has been doing a lot of groundwork.
Yes, that's absolutely right. David Lammy has also been doing a lot of groundwork with the Trump's new running mate, JD Vance. We know that their teams have been speaking a lot over the past few weeks in anticipation that he might be selected as Donald Trump's running mate. David Lammy is an interesting character. Obviously, he's foreign secretary, but has previously been very openly quite critical of Donald Trump in the past. So shoring up these relationships is going to be very important. Now, it's worth saying that obviously when it comes to the UK and US working together, it's more about how their administrations work together than the two leaders per se. But obviously, it's useful to have those lines of connection open.
Yeah. Some good news from Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely. So Ukraine has said that Vladimir Putin has withdrawn the last of Russian naval patrol ship from its base in Crimea, which they say is a victory for Kiev and a victory for Ukraine's campaign against Moscow's naval infrastructure. Ukraine says it's deployed aerial and naval drones as well as missiles to push Russian naval forces out of Ukraine, and much of Putin's Black Sea fleet has now been pulled back from the Russian port city of Novosibirsk. I don't know if I said that correctly. But yes, a real victory for Ukraine, something that Zelensky's going to be very pleased about, especially as Putin said that he's not afraid to work with Donald Trump if the Republican candidate comes to power and wins the US presidential election.
And we're hearing from the FT, of course, that Viktor Orban has leaked this letter that he's written to the EU saying that as soon as Trump comes in, there is definitely going to be an end to the war, that there's got to be negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and also China. So, I mean, we are facing seismic changes on the world political front.
Absolutely. And a lot of this is led by the fact that we are likely to see Donald Trump in the White House come again in November. We know the Republicans have been very hesitant to push through further funding for Ukraine. And it seems like international support in some ways is waning. So, yes, it looks like a diplomatic solution may be produced. But whether that is actually possible when you look at relations between Russia and Ukraine is a completely different question.
Yeah. Finally, let's have a look at Burberry, because things are not great.
No. So sales are down massively for Burberry, the fashion brand. Its share price tumbled more than 65% in the last year. And there's been a lot of soul searching about why this must be. And some commentators say this is because Burberry, which is a brand that has been traditionally known for its classic pieces such as the Burberry trench, has been trying to diversify too much, become too kind of edgy and haughty, too many accessories, hats, scarves, little bits and bobs that Burberry is not synonymous for. And they say this is quite a good example of why, if you are a classic brand, it's much better to stick to the stuff you know than to try and diversify out and become, you know, a brand that is slightly different from your namesake.
Yeah. And I mean, there have been some changes there. A lot of money put into the country, into the company rather, and under the leadership of Aykroyd, I think it is, who of course has successfully expanded Alexander McQueen. We were expecting to see great things from Burberry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, there were several new hires that they thought would really kind of explode Burberry's success. And there were lots of these kind of big publicity events with lots of celebrities and fashion designers in the front row. But actually, it looks like there is always a danger with trying to go too far with these things. And actually, what customers really want to see is just really focusing on those kind of quality products that they're known for, like the Burberry coats and trenches.
And if you can't sell raincoats in this weather...
Well, precisely, yes, indeed. There's no excuse.
Zoe, thank you very much indeed. That's Zoe Grunewald there. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. Israel struck the southern and central Gaza Strip yesterday, putting more pressure on Hamas following a weekend strike targeting the militant group's leadership, which killed scores of Palestinians who'd sought shelter in a makeshift camp. Later on Monday, in Deir al-Balah in the central Gaza Strip, a place where Israel has not yet invaded and where hundreds of thousands have taken refuge, the municipality issued an urgent statement saying it was no longer able to provide 700,000 people in the area with drinking water after running out of fuel. In France, the far-left faction of the alliance that won the most seats in the parliamentary election suspended talks with its partners on Monday, plunging the left's efforts to capitalise on its victory into disarray. The hastily formed Nouveau Front Populaire, which includes the far-left party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the Greens and the more moderate Socialist and Communist parties, had hoped to build on its election success by naming a prime minister and forming a government. The acrimony is also imperiling efforts to agree on a contender for president of the new National Assembly when it sits for the first time on Thursday. And the Financial Times quotes Hungary's Viktor Orbán saying that if Donald Trump wins the US election, he's developed well-founded plans to demand peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. In a private letter to the EU, the Hungarian Prime Minister said that the prospect means that the bloc should reopen direct diplomatic communication with Russia and start high-level negotiations with China to find a peaceful solution to the war in Ukraine. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. The Pakistani government has said it plans to ban the PTI, the party of jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan, which is also the largest opposition party. The decision on Monday came days after the Supreme Court handed a major legal victory to the PTI by declaring it eligible for a share of seats reserved in national and provincial assemblies. The government plans to appeal that ruling and to bring treason charges against Khan and two other senior party leaders. Well, I'm joined now from Karachi by Lynn O'Donnell, who's a columnist for Foreign Policy magazine. Lynn, it's lovely to have you back with us. Why issue a ban now? Are the government out of all other legal options to remove the largest opposition party?
Hi, Georgina. Thanks for having me. Whether the government is out of options is I don't. To be honest with you, I don't think they'll ever run out of options. The law is a battering ram used by political parties in Pakistan against each other. And as Imran Khan did while he was Prime Minister, the prevailing authorities are using the law against him. Now, his party, the PTI, won the most seats in the contested elections in February. The opposition parties panicked. They formed a coalition and Imran Khan refused to get into bed with any other party. And since then, the coalition has ruled very fragilely, but with the backing of the military, which is the most powerful institution in Pakistan. And Imran Khan is in prison. He's got something like 150 charges against him, including incitement of riots and this very sordid case that was kicked out of court last week over an illegal non-Islamic marriage. And now, as it looks like he's approaching the point where he may be released, the government wants to ban his party to make sure that he cannot take power.
What official reason has the information minister given for banning the party? How are they justifying this?
Well, they're saying that the party is illegal. They're trying to get some sort of legal way of charging Imran Khan as the leader of the party with treason. And they already say that the PTI is a proven instigator of riots. When Imran Khan was kicked out of the prime ministership by a no confidence vote in April last year, the riots followed. And then when he was arrested in August, these demonstrations across the country exploded and military installations were attacked. So that's a pretty serious charge. And what they're basically doing is bringing to to the fore. Everything they're bringing into play everything that they possibly can to ensure that Imran Khan, who is essentially the most powerful and popular politician in Pakistan today, cannot regain official power as Prime Minister, and that his party remains on the outside of power, of recognised power.
So you mentioned unrest, and of course we know that millions support the party. Are we going to see a continuation then of people taking to the streets?
Well, it's always likely. There's extremely high unemployment and dissatisfaction here with the prevailing government, with the coalition that's in power. I've been in Karachi for a couple of months now, and I can tell you that this is what the future looks like when there is no law, when there is no respect for the prevailing government, when the impact of climate change comes right down to street level, when people are really all out for themselves and just want to get out. Everybody I know and everyone I meet wants to leave Pakistan. This is a state on the edge of economic, political and social implosion. On Friday night, we also had the International Monetary Fund extend, I think it's been something like 24 bailouts of the Pakistan authorities, another $7 billion that will be released over the next 3 years to help the government try and make ends meet. And what it's had to do is raise taxes, remove subsidies from food and fuel, and target the middle classes who are already in a lot of trouble to try and meet the conditions that the IMF puts on these loans. It's already got loans that it has to repay to the UAE, to Saudi Arabia, to China. And what the government has been doing for years, including the government of Imran Khan, is use new loans to pay off the interest on old loans. It is unsustainable. And the argy-bargy around Imran Khan is a way of utilising the court system and the law as it stands to deflect attention away from the failings of whatever government is in power in Pakistan at any time, and that includes Imran Khan.
And Len, just before you go, I mean, I wonder if this underscores the military's significant role in Pakistan's politics. I mean, Khan was initially supported by the generals, then turned against them.
Well, that's absolutely right. And it was in turning against them that he wrote his own death warrant as a political leader. He was brought to power in 2018, sucking up to the military and the generals, who are known here as the establishment because they influence civilian politics and they manipulate the court. Any doubt that the courts were manipulated was dispelled last week when half a dozen High Court judges wrote a letter to the Supreme Court saying we have been intimidated and threatened by the military and the military intelligence agency, the ISI, to maintain our pressure on Imran Khan and PTI. There isn't anybody in this country who doesn't know that the military basically pulls all the strings.
Lynn, thank you very much indeed. That's Lynn O'Donnell, and you're with Monocle Radio. Now, in the UK, we've had a mild summer, to put it lightly. So given the cooler weather, it's no wonder many of us are already thinking of hitting the slopes. Luckily, the journey from London to the French Alps will soon be faster and more eco-friendly this winter. Eurostar has rebooted its snow train service, which will link the UK to the best ski resorts in Europe. Monocle's Deputy Head of Radio, Tom Webb, caught up with Paul Charles, the founder and CEO of luxury travel and trade consultancy, the PC Agency, and the former director of Eurostar. And Tom began by asking Paul about the significance of ski train return.
Here we have Eurostar putting its energy back into the snow train, which is legendary, really, among skiers, snowboarders, those who want to get to the Alps. It was launched many, many years ago originally and started as a non-stop service from London up to Bourg-Saint-Maurice on the Italian border. But more recently, Eurostar has begun working with its French colleagues at SNCF to ensure that anybody on the train now changes at Lille. So the new service will start in December. It will run to the end of the ski season, and anyone wanting to get on the train will change in Lille, along with their skis, of course, and then they can get a service straight into the Alps.
It sounds magical, but how magical is it really? You've been on board. Are the views as good as they sound?
Yes, it's still, I would say, the finest way of arriving in the Alps. You have a more seamless journey along with your rather cumbersome ski equipment, of course. And the beauty is on the ski trains, they allow more space for that ski equipment. Everybody can, free of charge, bring a pair of skis with them on top of their usual luggage. So that's one of the main attractions, let alone the beauty of traveling, especially that last couple of hours through to Chambray, Albertville, Moutier, and La Plagne, and up to Bourg-Saint-Maurice. It really is a beautiful way to arrive, rather than having to fly somewhere like Lyon, for example, and then make a multi-hour journey up into the Alps.
You've listed a comprehensive list of benefits, but can you bring your own booze?
Yes, you can on board Eurostar, and many passengers do. One of the benefits, of course, is that you're not having to go through the rather messy airport picture at the moment. It's still very difficult and unpredictable in some cases, getting through an airport, even off-peak in a January or February, when, of course, it's peak for the ski season, but not so peak for normal travel. Travelling by train is still remarkable. Of course, it's more sustainable. You're using fewer emissions, but it's still remarkable to be able to start in London with your skis and around about 8 hours later arrive in the French Alps. And that's what, of course, it would take if you were flying as well. You'd check in 2 hours before your flight. You'd have the flight itself, of course, of around about 2 hours. So that's 4 hours. Then you've got to wait for your skis to come off the plane. On the baggage belt, that's probably another hour. And then you've got to drive or take a journey up into the French Alps. So the journey times for both are pretty similar, but you burn far fewer emissions travelling by Eurostar.
Ski resorts are notoriously hard to get to, always in the mountains, very high up in snowy and icy climates. You've made the point about how train travel is comparable to times with flights, but what about the cost?
Well, they are definitely more spacious. It's definitely more seamless and spacious to go by train, and you get the view, as you say. But yes, it can be more costly. There's actually been less differentiation more recently between air and rail fares to get to the French Alps. That's because airfares have shot up during high inflation, and they haven't come down. Those fares are still pretty pricey. So there's not as much of a gap as there used to be. It used to be round about £100 to £200 difference more expensive on the train than it was by plane. But now with higher fares on the flights, those prices are much more similar. And of course, you get more space and a better view travelling by train.
And this is a trial. How successful has the trial been? And what about expansion from St Pancras and Germany?
Well, the snow train will leave every Saturday through the winter ski season. It's been done before. As I say, they've had non-stop services in the past and turned those into connecting services at Lille. And it's pretty easy to connect at Lille. So Eurostar knows that this is very popular with skiers who want to burn fewer emissions and obviously be more sustainable. Eurostar itself is obviously going through a new phase. It recently merged with Thales. The Eurostar name and brand has stayed, and it will be expanding further. It's looking to do more in Holland and non-stop or more direct services from London into Holland. And I think Eurostar is about to embark on a fresh new era. It had a very tough COVID period. It had to downsize significantly. It stopping at Ashford Station, which there's no sign of it returning to. But in terms of its sleekness, its smooth carrying capacity, the thrill of going under the tunnel still remains for many people, and its expansion abroad, I think we're entering into an exciting new era.
That was Paul Charles in conversation with Monocle's Tom Webb. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
UBS UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
It's time to talk technology now with Josh Coles, who's a consultant and a writer about technology policy. Josh, it's really great to have you back on the show. It's been a long time since we've spoken. Can we start by looking at Keir Starmer, our new British Prime Minister's plans to introduce an AI bill into the King's Speech?
Sure, great to speak with you this morning. That's right, so Keir Starmer, the new UK Prime Minister, will be launching a raft of policies in the King's Speech, probably around 30 laws on Wednesday. But one of those is set to be about AI. Now, obviously, we've all heard lots about AI in the past months and years now, really, as it's continued to evolve. And the sort of hype and the fear around AI has shown no sign of abating in that time. So what Starmer inherits on this issue is a lot of hope about what AI could do to sort of transform public services in the UK, get the economy growing, which is obviously a massive priority for the Starmer government, but also, of course, lingering fear both about the really scary AI takeover scenarios, but also more grounded concerns really about the impact on things like employment. And so that's the kind of thing he's going to have to juggle in this new policy. And the shape it takes, I think, is going to tell us quite a bit about the course of AI policy in the UK for the years to come.
Now, of course, Rishi Sunak was very much interested in AI, and so is another former Prime Minister, Tony Blair.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how these two now former Prime Ministers have kind of compared their approaches. So Sunak in office had this AI safety summit at Bletchley Park, which was relatively well received, but it aimed pretty high level really at these kind of rather further picture concerns about AI safety. And that can be measured maybe in years or decades. Blair has talked recently about much more near-term potential that the technology potentially represents, talking about kind of reinventing UK society and the UK state around AI. So some of the ideas that his institute has been putting out has been to use AI to cut health backlogs in the UK, and also to potentially free up teachers from doing so much marking and setting of classes. It's going to be interesting to see whether the AI really has that kind of potential in the near term for the Starmer government, or whether that's more aspirational, and how Starmer does try to juggle those competing concerns. It might be possible that he takes more of a kind of European approach. So we've seen Europe really get a bit stricter about AI recently in terms of introducing new rules about how much disclosure AI companies have to give about the models they're developing. So it might be that Starmer looks across the channel for some inspiration, at least at first.
Now, Josh, you and I both used to have that coveted blue tick on Twitter as it was then. Now it's X. We've lost our ticks, but anybody can buy one.
That's right. So this is one of the changes which Elon Musk has brought in, not only changing the name of Twitter to X, but also changing quite a lot of the infrastructure that underlies the site and that sort of shows us what we see on the platform. And he's run into a bit of hot water with the European Commission because of another one of the EU's laws as it concerns digital services. So the EU passed this very significant package of laws a couple of years ago, and it's now coming into effect. And it's led to the European Commission basically telling Elon Musk that his platform is in breach of this act. The main and most interesting thing, as you say, about this is that they're critiquing Twitter for how it's changed the blue tick service. So this used to be, as you say, a mark of authority or knowledge about subjects or renown, let's say, in the public sphere, but now it can be bought by anyone. At the time, Musk claimed that this was sort of democratizing the blue tick, and I suppose there's something to that. But now the Commission is complaining that this new model doesn't correspond to industry standards. What's interesting about this is that Twitter was the one who created this industry standard back in 2009. At the time, it was quite revolutionary to have a blue tick as a way to prove who somebody was. So now the EU is kind of turning this around on Twitter and saying the standard you created is no longer one that you're upholding.
And Musk is also saying that the EU offered him some kind of illegal secret deal?
Yeah, I think we've all seen that Musk says quite a lot of stuff on his platform. No evidence was offered for this claim, and it was actually shot down by the internal market commissioner of the EC straight afterwards on Twitter as well, disputing this idea that there was some illegal secret deal. It might be that there were some backdoor negotiations about how the provisions will be communicated. But I think, generally speaking, the commission has been fairly above board about what it expects of platforms. So it designated X as a very large online platform when the law came in. That means that X has this series of responsibilities to uphold, not just about blue ticks, but also about things like advertising and giving researchers data access. And those are the kind of things that the Commission is criticising Musk for. So as I say, no real evidence, I don't think, of anything backhanded going on here.
Well, let's continue with data access because, of course, rich data is crucial to training powerful AI, but there's a bit of a backlash going on.
That's right. So this concerns Meta, which is, of course, another big player in the tech space and increasingly in the AI space as well. And one thing Meta has, which its rivals don't, are the posts and photos that we've all been putting on their platforms for the last 10 or 15 years, which, of course, would be a real massive source of potential value for the company if they're able to get around these pesky data protection laws that maybe stop them from using these images and these posts in that way. So Meta has run into a bit of a roadblock in the EU because of another one of the EU's laws about data protection this time, which has obliged it to tell its users what it plans to do with their data to train their AI. And even that move has been blocked recently by the Irish Data Protection Commissioner. So the latest news is that a UK regulator has been urged to take a very similar step against Meta to stop it using its users' data to train its AI in this way. It's been urged to do this by the Open Rights Group and other digital rights groups in the UK. And so this battle is going to roll on, I think, and it says a lot about the amount of high stakes adoption of AI that's taking place. Companies have poured loads and loads of investment into AI. They think it's going to be the next big thing. I think, I'm sure in some ways it will be. But who gets to use the really valuable data sets to train the AI is going to be a big part of that. And I think Meta sees a real opportunity here, but also a real challenge.
Absolutely. We're talking about this in the context of the EU. What about Latin America, though?
That's right. There's been reporting this week as well that has showed, has really spoken about people on Meta platforms, particularly Instagram, in South America, where data protection tends to be a bit more lax. This isn't so much true of Brazil, but other Latin American countries have not been even getting the sort of opt-out option which Europeans and Brits have been getting. And that's led to a bit of consternation about that because they can't even opt out from their maybe artworks that they share on the platforms to be used to train these models. And I think if you look ahead 5 or 10 years and you see that AI models are resembling your own artwork that you never got paid for putting on the platform, you might be a bit peeved about that as well. So again, another controversy which I think is going to roll on and on.
Josh, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, Camden High Street is at the heart of Camden in northwest London. It's a shopping and transport hub for locals, and its market is a world-famous destination for tourists. At peak times, as many as 40,000 people throng the street, leading to conflict with vehicles. But that might be about to change. Now, I'm joined by Carlotta Rebello, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent and producer of The Urbanist. Carlotta, what's being proposed here?
Hi, good morning, Georgina. Yes, as mentioned, Camden High Street is set to be pedestrianised in an 18-month trial. And if you are hearing some noise now in the background, is because one of the reasons this pedestrianisation is needed is because of the heavy traffic flow in London. I'm meant to be there with you in the studio and have been transiting through London due to the heavy traffic of Camden Borough.
And we can hear you walking towards the studio. It's fantastic.
Yes, you can. But yes, it's been the project here is that there's an 18-month trial, which will see this one of London's iconic high streets really be pedestrianised. And this means that traffic will be removed.
We've just lost you for a second there, but I think that actually what's about to happen is that we're going to get you in person in just a moment, because I know that you're coming this way. Now, I need to tell you that I actually used to live in Camden myself. So, Carlotta, what are the benefits? How will it improve the area? And by the way, welcome and well done for getting into the studio.
Thank you, Georgina. I know. I mean, if there is ever a testament for pedestrianising streets, it's how it took me 20 extra minutes to get here this morning. But back to the story. The benefits is a very interesting question. This is twofold. First, there's the health and well-being angle. Now, we know that pedestrianising any high street that currently has a very heavy traffic flow means that there will be improvement in air quality, and that is a big issue for London. And this is not just due to the removal of cars, but because this plan will see the implementation of an expanded tree canopy as well, adding urban street furniture. So really this idea of life spilling out into the street. And plus, the addition of shading will help reduce the urban heat island effect, which is such a problem in big cities such like London, not only for the climate change aspect of things, but the impact it has on people and traditionally those most vulnerable. And then there's the side as well of hospitality and what it might mean for retail and for local businesses at a time that there's been so much talk about the future of the high street and what might happen in retail. These initiatives can be a vital lifeline for these local businesses. It will increase the amount of foot traffic. It will allow for, as I mentioned, space for businesses to spill out into the street, meaning that a lot of those who just might pass by now and don't have a space to linger, that space will be created. And an interesting number in Camden's council proposal, they mentioned that as it stands now, 90% of trips for shopping purposes across Camden are all made by either walking or cycling or public transport. So the question really is, who's driving through it? We know there's heavy traffic. So is it just a street that people used to go from A to B? Therefore, this plan really is not impacting those who might say, I need to drive there because that's where I live, considering that 90% of trips currently are made by alternative means.
But of course, public transport and deliveries will suffer.
Absolutely. Of course, there will be slots for delivery drivers. There'll be designated times throughout the day because, of course, businesses are important and that is needed. Of course, these exceptions do not apply to emergency services or rubbish collectors for that matter. But yes, buses will have to be rerouted. There will be an alternative route created for this. But, for pedestrianisation plans to be successful, transit and transport, it really has to be taken seriously. Cars might not be able to circulate through the high street anymore, and buses will see their routes changing, but cycling will be allowed, and it's all about promoting these more sustainable and active means of transportation, and to get people out and about. We need to remember that, this is all about helping boost local businesses and helping bring people to the area and make this a more enjoyable experience.
Carlotta, thank you very much indeed. Always an enjoyable experience to talk to you. And that's all for today's programme. Thanks to our producers, Vincent McAviney, Laura Kramer and Christy O'Grady, our researcher, Sana Jumani, and our studio manager, Flynn Symonds, with editing assistance from Steph Chungu. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. Vinny will be here with The Briefing live at midday in London, and The Globalist will return at the same time tomorrow. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thanks for listening.